Well, I want to welcome everybody to the Save Our Water monthly meeting. We have a prime agenda today, so I want to go ahead and get started. We may have some people come in late. I love 8 o'clock meetings. 8 o'clock in the morning. I don't like 8 o'clock at night meetings. So, but then everybody's tired and angry and don't like to talk to you. So hopefully we're not that way this morning. First off, I'd like to have our board members stand up and introduce themselves.
I'm Kenny Embry. I'm Vice President.
Brian Vest, Treasurer.
Sam Sylvester, Secretary.
And I'm Jerry McCormick.
There's a board member.
They're busy back there. Dan Huddle and Don Edgar.
So I'm Jay Ewers, a board member. She's also mayor of Eufaula.
We have, do we have any state legislators here this morning? Would you stand up and introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Ed Kennedy, District 15, which includes parts of Pittsburgh, McIntosh, and also through all the other 4 counties.
Donnie Condit, District 18. I will go through the counties. It's Pittsburgh, McIntosh, Hughes, and Cole counties.
Do you have any county officials here?
I'm Gene Rogers. I'm down Pittsburgh County, District 1 Commissioner.
And city officials?
I'm Bob Baxter, I'm the city manager in Oak Baldwin.
Now you can.
Okay. So I'm Jay Dornan, Mayor, and my Community Development Director, Gordon Payne.
Do we have any tribal leaders, representatives?
Choctaw Nation Tribal Council. Ron Perry.
You're a tribal representative.
Tom Bates.
We also have some folks here this morning that are vying for some of the state and federal legislative positions. And I would like the those people that are candidates for federal positions to stand up and introduce themselves. All right, Rob.
Michael Folks. I'm the independent candidate for Oklahoma 2nd Congressional District.
I'm Rob Wallace. I'm from Fort Gibson. Been in eastern Oklahoma about 20 years and 25 years, and very sensitive to the water issue, and had a position on the water issue for a long time. I'm glad to be with you this morning.
Thanks, Rob. I'm glad to have you here. Rob's going to have to leave here shortly. So, Rob, do you have anything else you want to say at this time?
Well, I'd just like to say that it's very important that the person that sits in this seat in the coming sessions of the Congress be very sensitive to the issues of water quality and water quantity in eastern Oklahoma. This is a tool that's going to be one of the keys to the development of the economy in eastern Oklahoma. And it is a resource that has to be developed here in eastern Oklahoma and not developed in Dallas and not developed in western Oklahoma, but developed right here. We need to recognize it for the value that it is as a resource to draw jobs here to eastern Oklahoma, to develop these communities. And it's absolutely essential that when we're considering its value, that we're also considering its economic impact, not just because we're going to turn on a tap and let it run out and brush our teeth in it, but because we're going to swim in it and ski on it and scuba dive in it, and we're going to canoe on it. I will tell you that one of the things that my family has enjoyed over the years is we're avid canoers, whitewater canoers, and we love the rivers and lakes in eastern Oklahoma and in western Arkansas and northwest Arkansas, frankly. There are certain intangible values in these water resources that are not being taken into consideration by anyone. And some of those values are the ability to use these resources as family development resources. And if there's one thing we can put our finger on right now in our culture today that we've got to make sure we're putting an emphasis on, it's family. And so I'm very sensitive to the issues. Penny and I have been communicating well over a year now on the issues associated with water in eastern Oklahoma. I just want you to know that if you send me to Washington, I'm going to be a champion for water in eastern Oklahoma. I appreciate being here with you this morning.
It's obviously very important. I would not be here myself if it wasn't. This is something we've got a lot of common opinions on. I'm one of those people that also uses water a great deal. I've got people that fly in from Europe to come spend time with us during the summer. And one of the things that we do is take them out here to our lakes, to our rivers. These are great assets for us because they get to come here and do things they can't do there. It's a foundation for our tourism, and that's just one small part of it. Quality, quantity, the availability, how we manage it, how we look after it. All of our needs need to be looked at, and that's what I'm here to do also. Let's let you know, I will be as a strong supporter of this because it's another one of those critical issues that we all have to pay attention to.
We also have Dean Roberts from the Corps of Engineers that's here with us this morning.
Hello.
Did I miss anybody? If I did, yeah. Okay, what I want to try to do, hopefully I can do, is to try to get us all up to about the same level on the water issues in the state and what's been happening up to this point in time. Save Our Water got started in about between 2005 2006 because it was our understanding that some of the water out of Lake Eufaula was proposed to go to be sold to Texas. So we gathered a bunch of folks, and I mean there were a lot of people and a lot of excitement and a lot of effort put out by a lot of people in the Eufaula area. Not only was the concern about water being sold out of the lake, but at that time the lake levels hit almost, well, lower than where they are today. So it created a lot of interest. A lot of people's boat docks were sitting on the ground. So Save Our Water worked with the Corps of Engineers and the Southwest Power Authority to try to get some management of lake levels in Lake Eufaula. So they started an effort and eventually got legislation. It was referred to as the WRDA bill, WRDA 2007. And in short, that bill basically said nationally that the Corps needed to do a study for management of Lake Eufaula with a consideration for recreation. That was those were the two sections of that legislation. And that, like I say, that passed in 2007. And from there, also the Corps instituted a moratorium on lakeshore management. And that affected a lot of people that were in the process of building boat docks or whatever. So that moratorium has been in effect since May.
The moratorium was established from the environmental impact study over here. So it was initiated in May.
Yes, in May. And so right now we have the legislation of the WRDA bill, and the Corps also started an environmental impact study. And as a result of the WRDA bill, a federal advisory committee was recommended to the Secretary of Defense. And Dean, do you have any update on that at this point?
We're at the same status that we were last month when we met. The Lake Advisory Committee's proposal is sitting in our current Secretary of Defense's office awaiting signature. And it's went through all the reviews through Office of Counsel at headquarters. And right now, currently, our district is establishing proposed committee members, and that has been submitted to our local Office of Counsel. And so it's still in the ropes. Takes way too long, but we're still pressing forward.
And what's the status of the environmental impact study?
We're on schedule. The draft review is occurring internal, and it should be released in mid-November for public review. And I would highly recommend that all of us try to take a look at it. It's a lengthy document, but we'll make public announcement when it's out on the street for review. But if you get the opportunity, take some time to take a look at it.
Well, along about that same time, back in 2006, there was another effort going on. I think it started in 2006. So where the Water Resources Board commissioned a group to develop a study to develop a long-range comprehensive water plan, 50-year water plan. And that leads us up to our talk today, and I'm going to let Penny introduce our speaker.
Our speaker, J.D. Strong, is Executive Director of the Oklahoma Water Resources Board. He was the former Oklahoma Secretary of the Environment. He has spent, actually the update to this water plan started taking place before you took over, while he was also interim director of the Water Resources Board. But he brought the plan to completion, has made it a more open process than it has been in the past, and for that we thank you, J.D. And he's here to talk to us about the water plan. He's going to take questions. He'll also take questions about State Question 764. So, J.D. Strong.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you for.
You just have to tell me.
Tell you, okay. Well, and I'll let you know right off that I've probably got about 45 slides in there, which is more than anybody wants to probably stomach this morning. Certainly me. So, but I have everything in here from, it's important to sort of understand the huge variety in water resources we have in Oklahoma, because that shapes laws and our opinions, and the huge variety of folks' views about water, whether you're in the Panhandle versus Southeast Oklahoma and that sort of thing, as well as a little bit about our laws and regulations, whether it's groundwater, surface water, the difference between the two, that sort of thing. It's really kind of important to understand some of those basics of our water resources and our water law, to understand how the water plan evolved to what it is. But in the interest of time, I think I'll probably fly through some of that primer information, get right into the water plan, and that way we can maximize time for Q&A. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you for the invitation to be here. Always looking forward to getting out and actually being able to talk to people, interface with people, hopefully clear up some misconceptions and rumors that abound when we're dealing with water, especially in the Water Resources Board and that sort of thing. So, importantly, obviously from 15 inches to 57 inches average rainfall per year, depending on where you are in the state, affects everything that we do, and everybody's opinion and their values that they place on water, and just our ecosystems. Oklahoma is the most eco-diverse state, mile per mile, than any other state in the United States. And it's largely because of that huge variety in rainfall, geology, a lot of other factors. We look at the history of precipitation. One of the important things to note is that we have been through, in most of my lifetime at least that I can recall, one of the wettest periods of record in the state of Oklahoma. That, of course, has changed in the last few years. You talked about 2006 being an extremely dry year. That dragged us down to there. We bounced back in 2007 with one of the wettest years on record in the state of Oklahoma, that sort of thing. Water resources-wise, we've got 37 major reservoirs that store 13 million acre-feet. You all know Eufaula is the largest lake in terms of surface area, takes home of the largest in volume. Vast surface water resources. That stream water law in our state is similar to, if not exactly like, most western states. There's a huge divide between east to west, not just in terms of how humid and wet we are versus arid and dry, but that, of course, has shaped water law differences between the east and the west. You understand Oklahoma is right in the middle, right in that divide, and we've got a a relatively wet eastern part of the state, a relatively dry western part of the state. But the statewide, our stream water law is much like most of the West in that it's an appropriation system rather than a riparian system. Although we do have remnants and similarities to riparian in some of our ways that we handle water law. But essentially, you know, a water use right is a commodity. It can be severed from the land, which was critical for development in the West. In the West, a lot of development occurred where there wasn't water right on the bank. And so it meant water needed to be transferred, vast differences, to fuel development in the West. That has shaped appropriation law throughout the West. Requires putting that water to a beneficial use to actually vest that right. If you don't put it to a beneficial use, then you lose it. We have a use it or lose it type of system, so it prevents speculation, such as what happened here and probably was the impetus for this organization. In fact, you can't go in, try to get a permit. Well, you might be able to get a permit right off for a vast amount of water, hoping you can turn around and flip it, sell it, whatever. But if you don't actually put that water right to use within 7 years at the most, then you lose that right. It goes back into the water available to be permitted to other Oklahomans that can put it to beneficial use, that sort of thing. Next, please. So in Oklahoma, much like the West, when we're talking about surface water, stream water, we're talking about all the water inside a natural channel within the cut bed and banks. It includes ponds and lakes. In Oklahoma, water, surface water, does not belong to the Oklahoma Water Resources Board. It doesn't belong to necessarily whoever's backyard it's in, whether you're talking about a lake, whether you're talking about a farm pond. It's based on an ancient Roman law concept called res communes. It belongs to everyone. It belongs to no one in particular. It's just like our wildlife. Just because you have deer on your property doesn't mean those are your deer. Those are the deer of everybody in Oklahoma. They have the right, if they follow the laws and regulations of Oklahoma, to take those deer, subject to permission to go on your property to take it, of course, right? But that deer itself does not belong to you any more than the water right there in your backyard belongs to you. That's a very difficult thing for some people to grasp. Groundwater resources, we also have vast groundwater resources. We often think about western Oklahoma, where I grew up, being a very dry, waterless part of the state, but if you consider what's under the ground out in western Oklahoma, you've got things like the Ogallala Aquifer, which has 86.6 million acre feet of water in storage, which is enough to cover the entire state 2 feet deep in water. And that's just the aquifer underneath Oklahoma. And we only have less than 10% of that aquifer in total under our land. Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, Texas Panhandle have significant pieces of that under their feet as well. I won't spend a lot of time next on groundwater because I think you're mostly interested in talking about surface water. But groundwater law is completely different from surface water law in Oklahoma. We're talking about all the rest of the water. It could be just outside the cut banks of the stream. That falls under groundwater law, even though the drawing of that water may draw down the levels in the stream right next to it. In Oklahoma, with one exception in the Arbuckle-Simpson Aquifer area, we have a complete separation of groundwater, surface water. Groundwater is a private property right in Oklahoma. It's tied to the overlying landowner, and it has been since 1890, based on territorial statutes. And it is severable, just like mineral rights are severable in Oklahoma, groundwater rights are severable as well. You can lease them, you can sell them, that sort of thing. That use is subject to reasonable regulation by the Water Resources Board, and we do that through establishing equal proportionate shares. And honestly, and I forgot to mention this in the surface water law, domestic and household type uses of that water are exempt from regulation of the Water Resources Board. The same is true for stream water. Everybody has a right. This is where we have a somewhat like a riparian right in our state. Everybody has a right to use what they need to fulfill their domestic uses, which is kind of household uses, maybe watering a small garden, maybe watering stock or cattle up to the normal grazing capacity of the land. You don't have to get a permit for that kind of water use in Oklahoma. In fact, that water use is protected more highly than any other. Let's skip the history. It goes back to pre-statehood. But the Water Resources Board came around in 1957. The most significant drought on record ended finally in 1957. 1956, still one of the mid-50s. For folks that were around that time, know that was one of the driest times. In fact, the historical drought of record for the state of Oklahoma. So it's no surprise that the agency was formed in 1957, right after that, to really focus on water and make sure that it's developed soundly and that we're doing everything we can to make sure future generations don't run out of water. And that's essentially the mission of the Water Resources Board. Next, please. We can skip through all this, just to save you some time. Importantly, this is not our first rodeo. We're required to update the comprehensive water plan every 10 years. In reality, it happens when we get funding to do it. And so it hasn't happened every 10 years, but we have done a 1980 comprehensive water plan and a 1995 update at the Water Resources Board. The legislature in 2006, you got the date right, authorized the next update of the comprehensive water plan, authorized funding for that, and it was actually in an interim session of the legislature, and those meetings and that effort kicked off essentially in 2007. It was to be a 5-year update process. We got it done on time, we got it done under budget, and essentially at the end of the day, it was like most water plans to look at the demands by water use sector, identify reliable supplies to meet those forecasted demands. This is a 50-year outlook. Hopefully we can stretch that beyond 50 years and made efforts to do that. We did a lot of technical study work, not just looking at the supply-demand analysis, but these emerging water management issues, things that hadn't really been looked at before in the state. More than any other water planning process that this state has gone through and most other states, very comprehensive stakeholder engagement. Many of you were involved in a lot of regional, local input meetings that all went into developing ideas, recommendations, and at the onset, the goal was to find out how Oklahomans want their water managed for the next 50 years. Certainly a lot of controversy generated in that process, but that was all very productive and good, and that's what we wanted. We wanted to get those disparate views, whether you're in the Panhandle, Southeast, Northeast, Southwest, Oklahoma City, Tulsa. What's important to you, and what changes might you want to see in the future to make sure that your water needs are met in the future? And I think we got a really good sense for that in this update process. At the end of the day, we want to create reliability. We want reliable water supplies to meet the long-term needs of the state. Next, please. That's just a graphical depiction of it, but again, the most comprehensive plan ever done, and I brought a few copies, not nearly enough for everybody. The comprehensive water plan consists of an executive report, which is sort of a high-level overview of everything, includes the policy recommendations that came out of that stakeholder engagement process, as well as 13 watershed planning region reports. Of course, there's one for the Eufaula region, which has much more technical detail in it that we got from surveying all the water providers in the areas of these planning regions, looking at the long-term needs and demands of those systems, the population growth, the industrial growth, that